Hello, everybody. My name is Nathan Bell. This is Paddy Quinn. This is the Student Perspectives podcast, where we interview lecturers about their career path and the many possibilities you have after your degree.
Today, we are joined by senior lecturer here at DBS, innovator in the field of film education, from creating Ireland's first single honours film degree to producing films and podcasts and publishing books which have been on Amazon's top 10 charts. His career is a testament to embracing uncertainty and following your passion. Please welcome Doctor Barnaby Taylor.
Wow, thank you very much. And thank you for actually looking and doing your research. Wow, that's a fantastic research. I feel really honoured to be here. And I'm very excited about having a conversation with the two of you. So thank you, Paddy and Nathan, for inviting me on what I think is going to be a really fantastic series from episode 2 onwards.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. So the first question is just for anyone listening who doesn't know about you for some reason, celebrity here. Could you describe, what is it that you do here at Dublin Business School?
What is it I do here? I'm a senior lecturer at Dublin Business School. I have been here since 2007. I have been involved in lots of things at Dublin Business School, including, as you said, designing a film degree, which gave me great pleasure. I am very interested in program and assessment design. Myself and a few colleagues are involved in finding practice-based opportunities for students to do more than just study in the areas of creative media. So, as you would have seen, we have a 10-year project that we've been working on called Voices on Film, where we are working with people like yourselves to actually add meaning and value to your educational experience. As a senior lecturer, I'm also expected to be on the front foot when it comes to research. So I've started a very recent research seminar series. I'm working on a new project at the moment, which I'm very excited about. So basically, I'm the luckiest man alive because I actually love my job.
Well, that's amazing then.
That's a great thing. And I think we wanted to start where it all began. You've got such an interesting career path, but we wanted to bring it back to the beginning.
Okay.
You grew up in Kent, am I correct?
No, I grew up in East Sussex, in a small seaside town called Hastings.
Okay.
Hastings, I was thinking about this on the bus on the way in. I went to secondary school in 1979, just as Margaret Thatcher came into power. So my teenage experience of Hastings was what it was like to be in England in the 80s, which was pretty grim. So small seaside towns all around the world don't really fill you full of confidence. They kind of tend to crush you and make you think that your options are fairly limited. So I ended up not going to university at 18, like lots of other people I knew. I just started drifting through pretty rubbish jobs, earning enough money to pay rent and get wasted at the weekends. And it took me until I was 26. And indeed, the prompt was my mum and dad divorced years ago, and I would go and see my dad regularly. I had a good and still have a good relationship with him. But after years of me going and seeing him and me moaning about how miserable my life was and how I was never, he just looked, stop, he said. I bet you £100 you won't change your life. And at that moment, I thought, I could do with £100. So I enrolled at night school and did an A-level. I had got a couple of A-levels anyway. Everyone else in the class were applying for university. I had this really boring job at a local newspaper. And so for a laugh, I applied for a university and I chose universities near me and ended up applying for a single honours film degree at the University of Kent in Canterbury because it was an hour away. So I thought if I hate it, I'm not 4 hours away. So at least, and so then things started snowballing. So I applied for this and I sat the A-level exam, and a friend of mine was working in Italy as a rep. So he said, well, look, why don't you come over? So the newspaper I was working for was making people redundant. So I was able to leave the newspaper, pay off my small debts, go to Italy for 6 months and work with some friends. And it was as fun as you can imagine it to be. And then my mum phoned to say, hey, you've got your results, you passed your A level. And then she phoned me the following couple of days to say, oh, you've been accepted at the University of Kent on this degree. I had to get an A in my A level to get the place. So I came back from Italy end of August and then started a degree. Now, I was 26 when I started, and it had taken me all of that time, because we all spend our lives knowing what we don't want to do, but it's very hard to know what we do want to do. So that's why I say to you today, I'm still finding out what it is I want to do, because I'm so lucky to have been able to. It's the first thing I've ever done in my life that I'm actually good at. No one else in my family has ever been to university. I'm the first person in my family to have a doctorate. Did the undergraduate, and then people said to me, oh, you should apply for some government funding to do some research. So I applied and got funding for a master's. And then while I was doing the master's, the University of Kent said, hey, why don't you apply for a 3-year scholarship? We'd love you to do a PhD. Without the funding, I would never have been able to do it. Coming into the last 6 months of the PhD at Kent, and then they said, oh, you can start applying for jobs. I applied for jobs all over England and elsewhere. Only people that called me for interview were Trinity College. So I flew over to Dublin for an interview, did the interview. My dad and my brother picked me up from Gatwick in the evening. I was like, oh, they hate me. It went really badly. Got a phone call from Trinity the next day and saying, hey, we'd love to offer you the job. And what do I say? Can I think about it? And I look at it now and I think, what was I thinking? But at the time, because I'd never had any career guidance, I thought you had to say things like, well, can I think about it? So the girl on the phone went, well, you can, but like, don't leave it too long. So I put the phone down and my dad said, what happened? And I said, why have you done that? So like, I didn't want to call back straight away. So September the 1st, 2004, with no friends, no relatives, no relationship with Ireland, I landed at Dublin Airport and started working at Trinity College. So 3 years at Trinity, and then went straight from Trinity to DBS.
I think that's really common with our students. They all come here with no idea or plan, or they just get an acceptance offer and they come. What was life like adjusting here?
It was crazy, because like that thing where you know where you live, there's always a chance you might bump into someone you know if you grew up there. I knew wherever I went in Dublin, I would never bump into anybody I knew. So like on a Saturday, when you think, well, I'll do Saturday things, you're wandering the earth alone like Kung Fu. It's the maddest experience.
Do you think there's also some freedom in that maybe people don't know you and you can reinvent yourself? And
There is. No, indeed, absolutely, Nathan. I mean, and now I look back at it and it was really formative. At the time, it was profoundly terrifying because I was so far out of my comfort zone. And we always say to people, it's a good thing to be out of your comfort zone. But when you are first not in your comfort zone, it's terrifying. I look back at it now and I think, oh, it made me the man that I am and all of this kind of stuff. But at the time, I was really miserable because the term hadn't started. So I had a 3-week period. I used to go to one of the hotels on Dame Street because the only time I could ever have a conversation with someone was when there was Premiership football on a Sunday. So I would go into a pub and have football chat with people who were over in Dublin, like English people who are here for a stag weekend or something. And that thing that people can do, you can talk about something like football, and it doesn't mean you're going to be best friends with someone. You can just say, oh, you know, gigs, Gerard, all of this kind of stuff. So I would have peripheral conversations and then go back to this flat that I had down by Pierce Station. So it was the maddest thing. I'm glad I did it, obviously, but I had no choice because doing a PhD puts you in a position where it's kind of all or nothing, because there's not much point doing a PhD nowadays unless you're doing it in pharma or something where there is a career for you, because, you know, it's such a gamble that you can get something out of it.
Yeah. And to go back to what you were saying at the start, do you think, were you always passionate about film, or what were you passionate about, or were you completely lost for the 8 years after?
It's an interesting question, because I, like all of us, I had been watching films since I was, 3. So my mum was a single parent. She took myself and my brother in 1977 to see Star Wars, the one you would know as the 4th one, but at the time it was the first one. 78, she took us to see Grease.
Great movie.
always had a more affinity with the T-Birds than the Rebel Alliance. And so even I still teach, I still use Grease in my classes. I never knew that I was going to have a career in cinema. I remember always being interested, and the BBC used to put on what they would call foreign films late at night. I remember watching Kurosawa's Seven Samurai when I must have been, 17 or 18. It was on at 12 o'clock at night. I think it's 3 hours long. It was black and white, it's subtitles. And I remember watching it and still being amazed by it. So maybe I've always loved cinema, but I could never have imagined.
You didn't know during those 8 years you were just living life.
Once I got to university, it was clear that that was a direction I could take because I started teaching. So this is my 24th year of teaching. So once you start teaching, the institution takes you quite seriously. And Kent was a great place to study. It's an enormous, great university. The library is the size of an ocean liner. So I was beautifully schooled in all of those academic habits. But this was my undergraduate degree. I started in 96. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, 96 is ancient history. So to be able to be in an environment where suddenly people say to you, you know what, you're quite good at this, you should keep going. First time I'd ever had that. I had none of that at school. I was encouraged to leave school at 16 and I had no support because it wasn't that mentality. And I loved my mum and my dad to bits, but they were too preoccupied with things to try and push me when I was at school. Mm-hmm. So you find your own path eventually. And that's why I'm very lucky, because I've just found something I can do and I'm still finding out what it's like to do it.
So did you pick that degree out of random, or did you know
I did a film studies A-level because I needed an A-level. And this was back to the bet. And I was looking at my local college doing evening courses, and I didn't want to do economics, I didn't want to do business, I didn't want to do psychology. Mm-hmm. So film studies as an A-level was the only one I fancied doing. So that's why I ended up then applying for a film studies degree, because I thought, well, I've done a film studies A-level, it's actually quite fun, I'm enjoying writing about cinema, but I had no idea what a degree was like. I mean, how can you know? How can you know what a degree's like? But I remember turning up and thinking, actually, I quite like this. I like taking books out of the library. And it's very alien as an experience to be in intellectual environments, and then go to the library. I remember a bit like Rocky on the steps, coming out of the Templeman Library at the University of Kent with my first ever checked out books and standing on the library looking out on the campus thinking, this could be the start of something. But it took me until I was 26 to have those thoughts, because I was just doing, me and my friends were driving around the country looking for parties in fields and things like that. The kind of the acid house thing that everybody did in the 80s into the early 90s. I mean, they were great times, but there was not going to be a career from all night raving in a field in Kent.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Well, I mean, I don't know.
You'd be surprised.
Well, exactly. I mean,
I know a guy.
In my spare time now I DJ, so it's kind of like these things go round. But at the time, so I had no concept of a career. And I had no one to say to me, especially at school. My school was an old grammar school that had lost its grammar school status. And all the teachers were really angry because suddenly they had idiots like me coming in who wouldn't have got into the school normally. And they were having to teach people that they resented because they'd lost their status. So they were focused on people going to Oxford and Cambridge. So they were saying to people like me, why are you still here? Thought we told you to leave, that kind of thing. So, at school, I failed all my A-levels and then realized that actually I should just go to my local library for 6 months to resit them and revise, but left school with 2 A-levels and no idea. And nobody said anything to me. Nobody said, oh, maybe you should think about a career in this, that, or the other. It's very different to what it is now.
I think it's actually quite common. I want to ask, how did you transition from someone who was going around looking for parties in fields to actually focusing and studying and putting your head down and getting your work done?
It's an interesting question. I think if you find something you like doing, you give it that time and attention, don't you? It's like people you like being with. If you like being with someone, you give them that time and attention, because we meet so many people we don't like being with that we don't want to give them our time and energy. So when you find something you like, I tend to be the kind of person that's all in. So with this study, meeting all of these amazing people, some of the academics who I met were just, my jaw was dropping at what's it like to be in the presence of people who can think on their feet and inspire you to think by simply saying something. And when you are in the space with really great public speakers, sometimes it's when they stop speaking that you fill that silence with your ambition and you go, oh yeah. So I met these amazing people who would start saying to me, listen, we really like what you're doing. You're really good at this. Would you like to work with me? So for the PhD, I had 2 or 3 offers of academics to work with. I ended up working with someone and we moved in different directions. So I do need to give a shout out to the person who saved my academic life, Professor Catherine Grant, who really saved my academic life and allowed me to complete my PhD. But the answer to your question, Nathan, is I think we all want something we care about, don't we? And I'm lucky enough to care. Now, I never knew I would care about education. I thought I would care about academia. But my career has moved into considering education and how it relates to lecturing and those kind of things. But I'm not a teacher. That's the last thing I am. I'm certainly not a teacher. You come into my class and all I want us to do is have a conversation. I can't teach you anything. 99%, 100% of people in my class can do things better than me. So who am I to stand up and say I am an authority on something? The only thing going to university taught me is follow your passion, and I know how to see things through. So if you ask me to do something, I know how to do it. And a PhD is 3 years of independent inquiry. So I'm confident now if you say to me, produce a report in 6 months, I know how to do that. But that's it. That's it. I just enjoy, I was with a class today and we were talking about words and I learned a new word today, the German word for curiosity, which is Geragig. And it just sounds so fascinating when you hear it. So that's my satisfaction. If I can learn one new thing every day, I'm a happy man. So today I felt fulfilled learning a new German word, which I'd never heard of before. That's for me. So for me, learning is transformative. And I'm still finding out what my life is like now. It's changed because I'm still learning. I like to think I'm the embodiment of lifelong learning, because the problem is with academia is there's 2 types of people. There are people that want to learn, I think anyway, like me, or there are people that think they know. And people that think they know always often are closed off to knowing new things because they think they know enough. So it then becomes an intellectual attitude, whereas actually we're all just curious, aren't we, as humans? We want to know. That's why we do things. What does this do? What happens if I press this button? It's not just me, is it? The 2 of you are very curious and creative.
Yeah, but you've had so many projects like of different formats, so many different creative projects.
Yeah.
Do you think that stems from a love of storytelling overall, or is it those particular creative projects?
It's a good question. I honestly thought that I would be, when I started taking academia seriously, once I'd finished my research masters and started my PhD, I thought that was going to put me on a track where I would be doing book signing sessions in American universities and all that kind of stuff, that old-fashioned view, or I thought I'd be in Oxford or something. I was really naive. So my PhD was published as a book, Manchester University Press. So at the time, and when I started at Trinity, I thought I was going to be a traditional academic that would spend his life lecturing and publishing books. Writing an academic book is just utterly exhausting. It's a minimum of 3 years. Like I was talking about this with someone the other day, and someone said, well, you could write a book on this. And I was like, yeah, but I'd have to read all that stuff. And I'd have to spend the next 4 years reading other people's stuff before I could find something. And I just haven't got the time. So I found myself also meeting people like yourselves in classrooms who didn't want a traditional academic, because that's not what you're looking for from education. So I started looking at, the first thing that I did is I have to teach people the history and theory of film editing through things like Soviet cinema. I had a real moment of enlightenment in one class when I was standing there thinking, but I can't edit. So how can I teach people about editing when I've never edited? So I then thought to myself, that's the first thing I need to do. So I taught myself to edit, so at least I wouldn't feel like an imposter. You know, it's like someone telling you how the history of cooking, but they can't cook. I mean, like there's no authenticity there. So then I started looking at things like, well, like with the film degree, we had no exams, because how can you study cinema and then why should you write an exam question on the origins of the Hollywood studio system? It makes no sense. You know, you're better off making things. So I started looking at what can I do in classrooms with people like yourselves who don't want to just sit there and listen to someone droning on about the history of things. So I started trying to find practical projects. So that's why we started Voices on Film 2014. I was in the old Film-Based cafe, which isn't there anymore. Film-Based is gone. And I bumped into foundational film scholar Professor Charles Barr, who had written endless books on Hitchcock, was instrumental in making film studies a university subject in England in the 70s. And my first impulse was, I'd like to tell his story. And then I thought, well, I should interview him. And then traditional interviews would be published in books. And I thought, well, no, why don't I just make a series of documentaries where he talks to the camera? And then Connor Murphy and myself were chatting. And then we thought, we've got a class of really talented students. Why don't we ask them to do it? Be great on their CVs. They'll get all of the bylines and everything. So we made 5 short creative documentaries about the life and times of Professor Charles Barr with DBS students. And then we started realizing that actually that's what we should be doing all the time. We shouldn't be separate with, that's why I don't think I'm a teacher, because I'm not the person who should be separate from the people in the class. We should all be sitting down together saying, what can we do? That's where we are. So all of these projects that I've been involved in have moved me further away from being a traditional academic. Now, there's a cost to that, because a lot of university posts still require traditional academics. So I haven't published as many books as I should have done, but I've made several films, so that's fine. You know, it's finding a balance. I mean, we all want bigger jobs, better jobs. We all want promotions. We all want more money. But my path has gone down a route where actually I feel a bit more worthwhile, because I like to think I've affected positive change within an educational, environment.
How do you find that balance then between your work and your personal creative projects?
I don't think of it that way. I think we're all creative people and we just do things. I don't see that what I'm doing is any different to what I would be doing at home. So one of the reasons why I haven't written more academic books is I got tired of the effort involved for the reward. Now, my textbook was published by Manchester University Press. I once got enough of a royalty check to buy an iPod Classic. I haven't had a royalty check for about the last 9 or 10 years. There's no money in academic writing. Some people can't even get their books published. So why bother when there are other ways to do things? So I started writing fiction because when my daughter was young, we used to listen to audiobooks, and we were listening to, I think they were the famous 5 audiobooks, you know, the cliched ones where we'll have jam sandwiches and milk for tea and stuff like this. And she loved them and I could hear them. And I started thinking, I could do that. And before I went to university, I wanted to write novels. When I went to university, the itch for writing was transformed into academic writing, but I fell out of love with academic writing and now I think I've written like 9 novels or something, you know. So, but like, it doesn't matter if it's cooking, photography, music. We're just creative people, aren't we? It's what we do. And we just need someone or an environment or an impetus to just do something creative every day, because to be creative is to be alive, isn't it? And we all want to feel alive. None of us want to feel numb and dead to the world, do we? So my book writing is someone else's guitar playing or whatever it is.
I'm curious what that process was like of getting a book published. Like, was it a hard process to go through?
The PhD
No, to just to publish a fictional book.
Well, you see, this is the thing. I'm one of these people that just kept asking myself, what happens if? So I had spent several years writing and a lot of time sending them away to people who wouldn't read them or would give me an email saying, sorry, not interested. So I thought, what happens if I buy the ISBNs and I publish them myself? So the whole idea of publishing has changed. So I bought 10 ISBN numbers. So I own the catalog and global rights, and then just decided to publish them. Yeah, published a couple of books, and they weren't really that important, or no one really cared. But this zombie series that I've written, Viro, the first one has been in the top 10 since 2018. Of like Amazon's got 1,000 million charts, but to have a book that is still in the top 10, like it was at number 7 today, and I don't make any money from it, but at the same time, it satisfied an impulse, because when you ask the question, what happens if? You want to find out. So I found out what happens if you publish, but now I've got this 100,000 word Dublin science fiction novel that I'm sending to traditional publishers because I want someone else to do all of the other stuff you have to do, like the marketing and the promoting and the designing the covers and all of that kind of stuff. I wish someone could do that for me. So I'm constantly going around in circles. But like, you know, like if you make music or a film, you have two choices. You send it to someone hoping they might publish it, or you just start your own YouTube channel. So publishing books was just like me setting up my own YouTube channel.
But how do you manage to like prioritize with all your different projects going on? And this is something I struggle with myself, is having so many projects that a few of them end up getting put on the shelf for a while, and like, because you have so many big projects like writing books and things. How do you manage finding a balance in that, in the workload?
I think you have to just believe in the process. Like I was lucky enough to see Jim Jarmusch do a film masterclass, I think it was earlier this year, down at the IFI. And he was saying that the film he made in 2016, Patterson, I think I'm right in saying it took him 20 years from the initial idea of a bus driver called Patterson who lives in Patterson. So for myself, Paddy, and it's an interesting question, when I was doing my PhD, I understood that if I did a small thing every day, I would keep moving forward. So I now, and possibly I'm too ingrained in that thing, but it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I just do a small amount of it each day, I will get something done. We all have 100 good ideas a day, don't we? That's what we do. I tend to just write mine down. I've still got ideas that I was developing at the University of Kent that I haven't ever finished. And I keep thinking to myself, I should go back and do that. You know, like at the moment, I'm developing a new kind of film theory, which is a culmination of all of this research I've been doing for the last 10 years. But also I need to start writing Viro 5 at some stage. So the answer to your question is, it's just what I do. You know, we all do it. I mean, you know, I'm lucky enough to have the kind of job that encourages me to do things. You know, I've found DBS to be very supportive of just getting on with things, you know. So if I want to try and develop a film project with students, I know there are students I can develop a film project with. I've got great colleagues as well. So I think once you know your thing, you just keep chipping away at it, you know.
I find momentum a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me how a €100 bet has now made you a doctor, a publisher, a lecturer, all from that small token. You have someone here called Adam who likes to call them lollipop moments.
Okay.
And that is your lollipop moment. So it's interesting how something that can seem insignificant can grow so quickly. Yeah. Do you have any advice for students who maybe are at the beginning stage about the process of becoming significant from a small, insignificant act?
I'd never give anybody advice because I'm the worst person for that. I think you just have to believe in yourself. And I think also believing in yourself is also being realistic. Like, for example, I do a lot of postgraduate and will work with people about self-directed projects, dissertations and things. If you say, and this is the lesson I learned myself, my PhD was 96,000 words. But if I got up every morning and say, today I'm going to write 96,000 words, I wouldn't get anything done. So I taught myself to write 200 words a day, believing in the process that if I can do that, some days those 200 words would be terrible. So I would rewrite 200 words and write 200 more. So if you can just keep moving forward, so the momentum is an interesting concept, but we get momentum through support. We get momentum through believing in ourselves. I mean, I've done so many projects that haven't worked, but it's the same thing with writing. There are some days when you don't want to write or you don't want to be creative. But when you have those fallow days, you believe in the process and trust that you will be able to do it again because you did it once before. So like with the PhD, which is what trained me, there would be days where I get nothing done, but I only wrote between 9 and 12. And I would, if I wasn't teaching, I'd go into the library at 9 o'clock and then go and have lunch at 12 o'clock and then walk away from the PhD. Wouldn't be up all night worrying about it because I just can't do it. So I just am, maybe I'm persistent. Maybe it's persistence, Nathan. You just keep going. It sounds like Beckett. You put one foot in front of the other because it's only the darkness there. So you just keep pushing on. But you guys are very creative. So you would be people who would be a great example to other students. If you want to do something, you just do it, don't you? You can't. Go on, sorry.
I think we're both good at not overthinking and then thinking very heavily because we've already gone for it.
Yeah.
But when you were in your early 20s and you were quote unquote or lost and kind of aimless, do you think that came from a lack of believing in yourself, or was it just being unaware of the potential that you had?
Both. I was chronically shy as a teenager. So when I was still at school, there was an all-girls school in our school, and if there was a group of girls walking, I'd cross over the road.
We do that too, don't worry.
No, I still do it now. So one of the problems I always had is I was too shy to consider the possibility that I could do things. And my school spent its whole time telling us you couldn't do things. And so one of the things that I think, one of the major achievements in my life is that I can speak in public. Because if you were interviewing me at 16, I wouldn't even turn up. I'd be hiding and I'd be blushing and I'd be stumbling. But it is true today, even after 24 years of public speaking, I still get nervous every time I walk into class. I still find myself thinking, okay, it's all right, relax, start. I'm okay once I start. I'm very good at talking now. But I've had to actually teach myself to overcome those kind of things. So when I was in the Lost Years, which is episode 6 of the Netflix series, it's because I had really good friends and I had a really loving family, but I didn't believe that there was anything there for me. I just thought, well, look, small town lives are small town lives. And I had aspirations. Most of my aspirations were from listening to music and things like that and thinking I could do something, but I had no idea what it was. And so clearly I was hungry, but I didn't know what I wanted to eat. And then I discovered something I liked and I refused to let go. I went to the University of Kent and ended up winning a prize for having the best first class honours degree in my year. And I thought, oh, hang on, that's quite good. And then this government funding. I mean, it was crazy. They paid me to sit in the library and write 60,000 words. I mean, who gets these chances? And then the scholarship that the School of Drama, Film and whatever they called it at the University of Kent, paid for 3 years of PhD level study. And without any of that, would never be sitting here now because I couldn't have afforded it. I had no money. Education's really expensive. And that's why I'm saying it's a gamble with a PhD. If you don't, like I know someone I was at the University of Kent with who finished their PhD 6 months before me. Their book was published 6 months before mine was. And as far as I know, they've never had a full-time job in 24 years. I mean, so why bother?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you have then any advice for anyone who would be in the same situation as you that doesn't necessarily know? Because I know so many people that don't know what their passion, haven't found a passion, and they're not sure what they want to do, and they like so many things. So do you have any advice to maybe help them orient themselves, or is it just like pick something and see if you like it? Or
I think possibly, Paddy, it's an interesting question. Maybe just be gentler on yourself, because everybody is under so much pressure to find their path, find their career. What do you want to do? What you can do with the rest of your life? That's why going from school to college is such a problem. Because how can you know at 17, 18 what you want to do when you're 40? And yet you're under that much pressure. My daughter's doing the Leaving Cert at the moment, and she's under the Leaving Cert pressure. It should be illegal to go to university straight from school. You should be paid by the government to do something else for a year, just to get some footing and find out who you are. You should be given a 6-month interrail pass by the government or something, or find a job, do some latte art or something, just anything, but not go straight from school to college. Because we've all met people who are doing degrees and don't know why they're doing them. They just feel they should do them. So I think if there's any advice, it's just breathe and relax and you will find something. But just don't be so hard on yourself, because everybody your whole life has been saying, what are you going to do? Why are you doing this? You've got to do that, blah, blah, blah. Breathe and just find things that you like within that. Find people that are interesting. Trust people when they say things to you, rather than just being closed off. Be open. If you're open-minded, you're much more open to new possibilities. If you have a closed mindset, like my small hometown, you can't see what's in the next town. You can't see why you should get on the train and travel 60 miles. So if you can just try and be a little bit more open, a bit more receptive, good things will happen. Terrible things will happen as well, because the world is an awful place. But if you can find small parts of your existence where you are open to possibility, you are interested in what happens if I have to adapt to situations. Don't forget, everybody we know has gone through the pandemic, and nobody was given any training about how to cope with the at-homeness of the pandemic. It was awful for everybody. But anybody who came out of that now has all of the skills of resilience, self-reliance, a capacity to deal with sudden discontinuous change, uncertainty. So any of us who are in this academic space all had that same experience. So when you are an early learner at degree level, traditionally you come into a program thinking you don't know anything. And it's my job to encourage you to list all the things you can already do. And if you start finding words like adaptable, persistent, resilient, they're job words. But most of the time, old educational models make people wait until they finish before they can find their words. I'm always saying to people from the beginning, pick your words. Start finding what is your brand, what can you do, how can you tell your story.
Do you ever get frustrated because you're around students so much, and they have so much potential, so much creativity, but they just stop themselves out of fear or lack of confidence? What do you kind of suggest students do in that situation when you know that they are so capable? How do you think you get the best out of them?
A lot of the time, people don't necessarily get all the opportunities they deserve, I think. So I think that my job is to make suggestions, create situations where new possibilities exist. That's why I don't think I'm a teacher, because I'm not. I'm just someone who might suggest something and you go, oh yeah, actually I might do that. Because it's very, very hard to stand out in such a homogenized thing as education. Everyone who leaves has got the same degree. So if you apply for a job, it's pretty much given that everyone who applies for the job has got the same qualifications. So what else can you say about yourself? So I think the trick is to start finding your story words. What makes you you? Why are you doing this? How can you do this? Because once you start understanding yourself a bit better, I think it allows you to understand that actually you can do much more than you think. So I don't get frustrated with people. I find sometimes that people need longer to find their confidence. And the problem is the educational system destroys people's confidence before and takes in, like the Leaving Cert ruins lives, effectively, I believe. I think it should be scrapped. And I know that's very controversial, and whoever's watching this will be very upset with me. The Leaving Cert does nothing but upset people, destroy their mental health. If you get 957 points or whatever it is, fantastic. But look at all the people who get onto degree courses on things that were second or third choice. And all of their mates are at UCD and they've ended up at wherever. So you start a new educational experience feeling dispirited and deflated. And that's wrong. You should come into any educational experience ready to go, excited, happy. Most people are. But I've met so many people who come into a first year of a program and are in mourning because the course they're doing is their second or third choice, or they didn't want to do it, but they felt they had to do something. That's not a good place to be. So maybe if that's why people are lacking confidence, it's because the educational system has failed them.
This is kind of a change of subject, but not entirely.
Go for it.
But we saw that on your website, you had a free guide on how to journal, basically, that people could download.
Yeah.
Is this something that's really important to you, being as you wanted to?
I teach reflective writing, and I think the problem with being at university or doing a degree is essay writing is becoming increasingly a minor skill. We were having this conversation off the set, but in 5 years' time, it's highly unlikely that anyone will ask you at a job interview about that essay you wrote in your second year. So I think that other forms of writing are becoming much more valid at degree level. So I do teach a lot of reflective writing. A lot of people find that just asking themselves simple questions like, it's week 5. How do I feel different from how I felt in week 1? Even noting small shifts in our own sensibilities, I think, or can allow us to get confident. Or think to yourself, right, the first week of something is awful. But if you can get through to the second week, you can look back and say, well, I felt like that last week. I feel 1% better. So things like journaling or any form of reflective writing, I think, should be compulsory for all of our students, not just, we should write less essays and write more scripts. We should do more creative writing, because the other problem with degrees is we force people to hide behind the third personness. So you're not allowed to say, I think this. You have to say, this essay will. And it's so inhibiting for people, I believe, that we need to create academic environments where people can say I. It sounds so silly. Another thing that education is obsessed with is grades. We should stop placing such an emphasis on grades and place much more emphasis on experience. So rather than having a graded assessment, 10 entries in your diary, and then we'll talk about them in week 8. And then if we're satisfied with progress, then you've passed the module, rather than you've got to get 54. Why didn't I get 63? So again, people's lives are dominated by grades, and it's very dispiriting, especially for first years. And it flies in the face of all of these things like universal design for learning. If we set up learning systems that are barriers for development. Like if you think about degrees, most degrees are still like Donkey Kong. I don't know if you ever played Donkey Kong, the old-fashioned game, where you're running like that, and then you're jumping, and then you're running like that, and you get to the top, and what happens? It resets. And then you go again. More degrees should look like Zelda. So you should make your own map. You should manage your own inventory. You should level up the things you're interested in, rather than being told you can't level up anything. You should go where you fancy going. I wonder where those trees lead. And an experience like that means that education needs to be 3-dimensional. Like you look at Moodle. Moodle looks like a dead banking website from 1996, or, I don't know, Friends Reunited. Moodle should look like Animal Crossing, and you should be able to go into that form of Moodle with your own customized avatar. I'd be an owl because I quite like owls, and you should go into a market square, and lectures, if you want to download them, should be apples you pick from trees. You know, that experience of an onlineness that you've all got, that everybody's got. Why do we not do that? Because most of the people who are teaching have never played Animal Crossing. So they would be lost in a world like that. We're okay with Moodle because it's just dumping stuff on Moodle. And then we spend our whole life having Moodle audits. You haven't put enough stuff up for your students. Forget about that. You know, we need to transform everything, because the one thing that is true about the pandemic is it broke higher education. It's smashed it into a million pieces. And it's our job now as inhabitants of this educational system to find new ways to exist together. So all of these things, I know they're probably very, very upsetting for some people who might be listening, but hey, it's my job to be looking for new ways to do things. And that's what you all do. So I need to at least try and meet you somewhere, like in the market square, and we'll explore the woods together or whatever. Do you know what I mean, though? I mean, like, that's where I see it.
Do you think that applies as well to less creative degrees like medical studies, or is it mostly for creative?
It's an interesting one. I have no experience in medical degrees. I mean, but I do understand, for example, that film students should be in the same class as business students, as marketing students, as psychology students, because what they have in common is more than what separates them. And you can learn much more from working with people from different perspectives than you can if you're simply only in the same class all the time. We're very lucky at DBS that we have a kind of global classroom, which is fantastic. But as we all know, 90% of all learning on a degree happens outside the classroom. So if that's true, and I think it is true, the World Economic Forum, someone wrote in 2022 that lectures are a good way of teaching but a terrible way of learning. If that's true, what are we doing for 3 hours a week? Why are we still there? So if we are still there, that's why we need to talk to each other. That's why we need to think of creative things to do, because education is expensive as well. It's not just financially expensive, it's a massive investment of time. So think about how timetables work. The pandemic broke timetabling. So we're still justifying why people should travel 2 hours for a 1 hour class. It's because the building needs filling. You know, so there are so many questions that need to be answered that it's exciting to be in the educational space, but that educational space needs people like you asking the same questions. Why am I studying this? What's relevant here? Why are you telling me to do this? Why can't I do that? Why are you asking me to write an essay? Why can't I make a documentary? Once you start asking those questions, that's where change happens. And it forces people like me to say, okay, where can we find common ground? Because I'm not just going to keep saying to you, sorry, Nathan, you're just going to do an exam and that's it. You know, you have to. It's about collaboration, because the problem is education spends too much time focusing on attendance and it misses the point, because the point of education is not attendance, it's engagement and participation, because we never talk about attendance in the positive. No one ever says to you, thanks for coming to all of your classes this week, we see you had 100% attendance. It's only ever dealt with in the negative, or you only attended 80% of your classes. Why aren't I emailing you saying, Nathan, thanks ever so much, you've been to every class this semester? Why are you not getting some kind of reward for that? Like, I don't know, if you buy 6 coffees, you get the 7th one free. So every time you tag into a classroom, why are you not getting, like, if you tag in 6 times, why do you not get a free coffee? Like, we don't think about these things, but like, we can't survive as a profession if you don't engage and participate. So why does a lot of education seem to slow participation and engagement? I think it's fear, because we learnt that everything we used to do didn't work in Zoom. You know, like 18 hours a week in Zoom and someone's just reading PowerPoint. Stop that. So I stopped using PowerPoint and just started talking to people. That's where some of these projects came from, because it was like, you know, I used to run a kind of a Friday lunch club where I would just turn up and say to people, join me in the Zoom room, it doesn't matter who you are, and we'll just chat for an hour. You know, so the pandemic was as horrific as it was, and obviously it was horrific for people, it was also profoundly liberating. So it caused me and many other of my colleagues to actually say, all those things I've done, all those things I do, I now need to think about how to do them differently. And that's really liberating, to be able to confront the reality of your own habits and say, okay, I've always done things this way, it doesn't work. So I think post-pandemic, like institutions, like individuals, I'm finding out I'm still learning how to do things differently. And that's part of the creativity thing as well. It's just nice to constantly look to evolve, I think.
Yeah. we don't want to keep you here all day, but we have too many things to talk about, so we'll have to get you back one day. But before we end the podcast, could you tell us a bit about your most recent project, Voice on Film? Is that the most recent one?
Voices on Film is funny. I did a research seminar paper a couple of days ago to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Voices on Film. So Voices on Film is a brand. It's an academic brand. Mm-hmm. It's a Vimeo channel. There's a Facebook page. There's an X feed. I hate calling it X. But that is so that when, like the Charles Barr films or 4-3, when people are involved in that, it is an opportunity to say they have contributed to a brand rather than saying it was college work. So 4-3, the film I made during the pandemic with 3 filmmakers, is a collaboration between Voices on Film, the SAH Journal, and a friend of mine who has his own production company. So it's the real worldness of things. So we're currently looking at what to do next with Voices on Film, and I'm hopeful of doing some kind of multinational collaborative content creation project. It sounds far more impressive than it actually is at the moment, but that's the next thing. And it's kind of, so that's kind of where I am with that. And we're all online all the time. I love being online. So if I have a platform where if you go onto the Vimeo channel, you can see student work published. And I think that's really important because a lot of video work that students do just gets deleted off of hard drives after a year. So what's the point? You know, so I always say to students, if you're making a video, make 2 versions, one to submit and then one which is to publish. You know, take the branding off of it and add your own branding. So the Voices on Film project has been the last 10 years of my life, which is really exciting. Who knows what it's going to look like for the next 5 years. I know it's going to be more content driven because that's where we all are.
And how can people keep following?
They can find it on Vimeo, so you can Google Vimeo Voices on Film. It's all one word, and you will see 10 years worth of work there. Don't have any T-shirts for sale at the moment, but the other thing is that no point doing something if you can't brand it and it be of value. So the Voices on Film brand was designed to add value to people's CVs, their LinkedIn profiles and things like that. That's what it's there for. So it's a collaborative research collective.
We'll put links to everything we talked about.
Fantastic, thank you.
Before we leave then, is there anything you want to promote or talk about if anyone's watching?
I've talked enough, my friends. You've been very patient. I just would like to say that it's a profound pleasure to be in the company of people who smile when they talk about creative things. Because I think that's the true sign of passion, when people are smiling while they're talking about things. So, look, thank you very much for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming. We do have a last segment.
Okay.
Which is, we're going to start this, but this is the first one. So
okay.
We want to have the last person that's being on the podcast leave a question for the next person.
Okay.
So for today, our question is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
The best piece of advice I've ever gotten? I would say someone like my PhD supervisor, Katie, would have said something like, don't take it too seriously. It's only an award. In fact, I remember her saying that to me. As long as you get to that level, it's an award. And she was talking about a PhD. So the one problem with academia is it's all so serious. So a piece of advice would be, use the word play sometimes. Take it less seriously. Certainly don't take yourself seriously.
And for our next guest, would you like to leave a question for them? It can be anything out of context.
Okay, off the top of my head, I would think a question would be something like, what makes you happy?